It's top of the hour. Let's get
It
rolling.
is. We are 100, right on time. Thanks,
Right
everybody.
on time.
This is episode number 22 of Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. And for those of you that may be joining us for the first time and want to catch all the previous episodes, you can do so on the Baseline YouTube channel, which is Baseline Web Training, all one word on YouTube, Baseline Web Training. And then each week, Dan is continuing to add helpful 2 to 3 minute how-to videos in the channel as well that answer some of our most frequently asked questions to help you guys all out in the field. And for quick introductions, I'm Andy Humphrey, Regional Sales Manager for the Northeast. We have Dan Conger coming in from New York City. He's our National Training Manager. And we've got Chris Wright, VP of Sales out in Salt Lake City, Utah. And the topic for today are 10 of our most frequently asked questions. And these are questions that are sort of coming in right now, this time of year, being top priority. And we also polled the support group and some other team members at Baseline to see what was coming in on their radars. And with that, I will hand it over to Late Night Dan.
All right. Yeah, this is a nod to late night. We were kind of talking about this beforehand. It's like Letterman, there's a nod to Letterman, but there's also a nod for the really old farts, Johnny Carson. So if you remember them, you are officially old. Which I'll admit I am. So this idea on the top 10 is really, as Andy said, it's like top 10 right now. In reality, we could do a top 100, and we're just kind of filtering through them. So with that, I'm going to start with our number 10 is how do you assign a soil moisture sensor on a conventional wire system? And nod to Letterman. Woo!
Nice.
You're supposed to do it after you answer the question, though.
Okay, yeah.
Do you even remember the question now? How are you going to remember the question?
Yeah, exactly. See, we totally derailed you.
What beer are you going to drink? I think that was the question. How do you assign a soil moisture sensor on a conventional wire system? And first of all, let's say, can you do that? Can we fit a soil moisture sensor on a conventional wire system?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. Right. Do you need any extra wire for it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, right. So if we're going to take a conventional wired system, we're going to hook a soil moisture sensor up. We don't need to run any new wire, and we can connect it to the nearest zone and use that zone wire and common wire to communicate back and forth to the controller. There's a few caveats on that, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What are some of the concerns that we need, or what do we need to watch out for on that?
You got to know what wire the sensor is connected to coming back to the controller.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So a lot of times they're all red.
Yeah. Right. So we need to figure out which wire it is, because when it comes back into the controller on a conventional wire system, we've got our R board here. And do you notice how the skyline it's invisible right here because it's green? You can see through it.
Yeah, hold it closer. It actually is pretty cool. It's an invisible.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
With holes in it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's because this is green, and I got a green screen up behind me. I'm not really in New York, by the way. So, on terminal A1 and A2, there are the smart terminals, and terminal B1 and B2 are the smart terminals. So we want to make sure that conventional wire with a sensor is hooked up to A1, A2, B1, or B2, one of those 4 terminals. Now, this is a 24-zone powered bicoder, so I have 4 smart terminals on it. If it was only a 12-zone powered bicoder, I'd only have two smart zones. Or
what if you have a 48-station conventional wired controller?
You get double that, so it's 2 per 12. Mm-hmm. So what is that?
Perfect.
Yes,
exactly.
And oftentimes we do get questions. Somebody may want to use 4 sensors over existing wire, but they have 6 zones, and so you can always add more terminals just to get those smart ports. Right. So if you wanted 8 sensors over conventional wire, but you only had 12 zones of irrigation, you would use a 48-station controller and utilize the A1 and A2 off each of the terminal boards to get your total. So there's some ways to sort of make a little hack, if you will, to make that happen.
Or you can run 2-wire from sensor location back to the controller and put it on the 2-wire posts.
And then you could do whatever you want. You could anywhere along the 2-wire path and you're golden, right?
So how do you know if you've got a sensor connected to the right post, Dan?
How do you know if you have a sensor connected to the right post? I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this one. And
turn the zone on, see if you get wet, see if the solenoid activates.
In the controller. So if you're running a conventional wire controller and you're standing there long enough, you're going to hear it go click, click, click,
yes.
click, right? So, and that's the controller that's going out to take sensor readings. And if there is a moisture sensor connected to the wire that is on the right post in the controller, there will be an LED light that lights up on the board that confirms that you've got a sensor connected to that wire.
True. Okay. Which is
Tech Talk Tuesday.
Nice. Which is why in my office controller, I disconnected my powered bicoder because it does it all night. It's going to do it every couple of minutes. My wife first said, "What is that noise? It's not keeping you awake," but put on the 2-wire board, it doesn't do that.
It's not a metronome.
And quick tip, always search and assign that sensor before you bury it, because you may have some weakness in the wiring, that existing wiring. So hook the sensor up to the zone valve, go back to the controller, search for it, make sure you find it. If you don't, you may need to repair a couple splices, but if you still can't find it, you may decide to move that sensor to a different zone valve. So we really recommend not burying it until you have good communication to the device.
Awesome. Number 9, I have a soil moisture sensor. Do I need a rain sensor?
Ooh, that's a good one. Everybody always asks this question.
Yeah.
I guess it kind of depends on what you're trying to do, doesn't it? If you want to use your soil moisture sensor in lieu of a rain sensor, that's not going to give you the results you would expect.
If you want the system to turn off when it's raining,
there we go. Yeah.
Then you use a rain sensor. It's
right.
When you stop to think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense, because the rain sensor is up in the atmosphere. It is sensing where the rain is at. The soil moisture sensor is in the ground. It may or may not even receive rainfall, depending on how much is there. If there is enough, it could take 5 minutes or 5 hours, depending on the type of soil and such. So if you want it to shut off while it's raining, use a rain sensor. Highly recommended just for PR purposes. And there's really no difference wiring one up to a baseline controller than any other controller, unless you want to put it on the 2-wire path. Which
will bring up that. Actually, that's actually a really good point. So let's talk about that for a second, is connecting up that rain sensor onto a controller, whether it's a conventional wire or 2-wire. We have rain sensor terminals on the board that we could connect it into. Now, if you do that, what will happen is the controller will pause and not run anything during that time, unless you've gone into the global conditions and told it to ignore it. But what if you wanted to have it influence some zones and not other zones? There's a way around that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So remember that the terminals inside the controller are control the entire system, right? Mm-hmm. And if you connect the rain sensor to one of our event bicoders, now it becomes a program-specific device. So then you can control it on the program level.
Right. And then you could influence, right? You could say, even though it's rained, I want you to wait 1 day or 2 days. Like, because here where I live in Southern California, we have some legislation that says if you water within 48 hours of a rain event, water cops coming by and giving you a ticket. It's not really a plant health thing. It's more of a political, but it's with an event bicoder, you could control that. You could influence that interval in which it rains next.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool. Okay, what's up next is, well, of course, it's number 8, is how do I run more than one zone at a time? Okay. Running
how
one
many
zone
zones can we run at a time?
Oh, a second question on that one. Mm-hmm. Well, how many zones can you run at a time? That's a 2-part, because it kind of depends. Depends if you're running a conventional wire system or a 2-wire system. So let's talk 2-wire first, right? If we're running a 2-wire system on a single controller, I can run 15 zones at one point, hydraulics excluded, right? We're assuming that if I've got a an 18-inch main line, I could run as many zones as I want, or if I have the capacity. So 15 zones at one point.
And you have to consider how many devices and wire lengths. So for those of you that this may be new, we have a matrix for this. You can go through and you can see I've got 62 devices and I'm running 2,200 feet. This is how many valves I could theoretically run concurrently.
I've had people in a classroom setting that are trying to say a gotcha. They're trying to catch me in like, well, are you saying that I can run 15 zones all the way out on the end of a wire? Like, no, we're limited by Ohm's law. There's some restrictions on wire travel and voltage drop and things. We can't get past that. But equally dispersed across your system, theoretically, you could run up to 15 on 2-wire. A conventional wire, it's a little bit different. We have on a conventional wire, keep in mind, this is a 24-zone powered bicoder. This is essentially two 12-zone bicoders. So I've got 12 and 12. I can run 2 zones out of this 12 and another 2 zones out of this 12. So I could run 4 zones concurrent on this board. And if I had a second board with 48 zones, I could run another 4 off of that. So that's up to 8 off of 48 zones that would fit inside a controller. Mm-hmm. Now so in this case, it's the limit of the board. And 2-wire, it's the limit of the transformer.
Right.
Yep. Another thing to keep in mind, sort of like the sensor hack, if you wanted more than the board's capacity, or if you were on conventional wire and you wanted more concurrency, you can use a 48 station controller and wire, 2 or 3 or 4 zones per board, split it up and get more concurrency.
Yeah. Yep. So coming back to the initial question is, how do I run more than 1 zone at a time? It's in the settings we call zone concurrency. It's another way of saying how many zones you can run at a time. And we can have vary zone concurrency by the program or by the entire controller. So if it's by the program, you can say that this program runs my drip zones. And I know my drip zones are small demand, so I'm going to run 5 zones at a time in my drip zone program. On my spray system, they're big giant systems, they heavy demand. We're only going to run 1 at a time in that program. But then we could also say for the entire controller, we could limit the numbers as well. So we can limit them different ways if you know what your hydraulics are. So you got to have some basic understandings of your mainline capacity and your water source capacity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, if you know those settings, if you know what your mainline and you know what your water source, an even better one is to go into the concurrency, and we're going to turn it all over the controller for a setting that's called manage by flow. And that's going to allow the controller to puzzle piece in the right flows to meet your design capacity, the number that you put in there. Mm-hmm. So I like that. You do research on one flow element and then turn the rest over to the controller.
Yeah. And keep in mind that can do it based on real-time flow if you have the flow meter device and you want to learn flow. Or it can do it based on theoretical flow if you want to take the extra few minutes to enter in 15 gallons a minute, 20 gallons a minute, et cetera, for every zone. The controller will, like Dan said, pick those pieces of the puzzle, mesh them together to maximize the total value of, say, 50 that you've put in. So generally, that's what I recommend because you're more likely to get it right than choosing the number of zones per program.
I agree.
It does take a little bit extra time, but it's well worth the effort.
So there's almost a follow-up question on this one. Number 7 is, how do I learn flow? Well, I'm going to start off saying, first of all, we've done a Tech Talk on this one. So go to YouTube, Baseline Web Training, look up Tech Talk Tuesday. We have a whole thing on Learn Flow. So that's one of them. You can learn flow a couple of different ways. You can learn it directly at the controller. So we could go in and learn it by, you can learn by zone and by program. You can also learn it through Base Manager. Andy, I really like your suggestion of getting it started out in the field. You can see what's going on and make sure that things are really happening right.
Do I do that on demand, or can I schedule it?
You can actually do either. You can do schedule or do it right now, then.
Wait, Dan, depends on the controller.
Oh, yeah.
That was kind of a trick question.
That's a trap you set for me.
That's what I do.
On the 1000, you cannot schedule the flow, learn flow. But on the 3200, you can.
Excellent. Okay, cool.
Can I schedule the flow on a 3200 in Base Manager?
only through live view.
I was going to say yes.
You must do it in live view because it's not part of the user interface of Base Manager.
Okay. So then maybe a second portion of this question is if I've got to go learn flow at my controller, and after a minute, it just stops. It stops learning flow. What's going on with that?
This is a good one. We're getting it quite a bit recently.
Yes, we are.
Which is awesome because it means people are wanting to use technology that's been designed this way. And actually on this note, coincidentally, and for those that are just like data, this year, it seems like we've sold a much higher number of flow sensors to controllers than ever before. So it's awesome to see people wanting this type of real-time data on their systems. So on a 3200, I'll just go ahead and answer this since I've already got the mic hot here. On a 3200, it comes pre-configured with 8 control points, 8 main lines, and they're assigned control point 1 to mainline 1, control point 2 to mainline 2. And if you only have one control point and one main line that you're using, and you've got it configured with your devices, you need to remember to go unconfigure the other 8 in order for the system to learn flow. It'll start and then it'll stop immediately. And then that's when we get triggered with phone calls where it's not learning flow, and you need to unassign those control points and those main lines that are not in use.
Yep.
So if I only have two main lines and 2 control points, I'd leave those 2 configured, but the other 6, unconfigure those. Okay.
Yep. The system will operate correctly. It just won't.
Do a little users video on that to put in there as well, Dan.
What's really fascinating is as I was going through this list of top 10, I realized I've got about half of them I've already got videos on, and then the other half, they're going to go on the top of my list and come up there. Beautiful. Number 6, can I use my existing conventional wire as a 2-wire path? Please don't. You can do whatever the heck you want.
No.
But don't do it.
Yeah.
They're all grown adults. We're all grown people. Just know what you're getting into, right? So we probably all have slightly different opinions on it, although I think we're going to come to the same conclusion. Don't do it. And my props are. So this maxi wire is a double jacketed wire, has a polyethylene jacket. It's 2 conductors inside. We can see the 2 conductors in there. It is not the same as a pair of number 14 wires that are PVC coated, and these are actually decent quality. These haven't been in the ground. These aren't all decomposed and cracking, and when you bend it, you can see that you can actually see the copper. It's porous. Moisture gets in there. If you start using these, it may work. It may work for a period of time. It's just really, when is it going to fail on you?
Yeah, those single number 14 wires, the design intent was not to carry data across those cables. It was just to carry voltage to the solenoid and power, but not to carry data. And so that's really the biggest difference when we're moving to a baseline 2-wire system. It could be different for other manufacturers, but our 2-wire is a data system, and we need to have a cable designed to carry data on it. Not the single number 14 gauge wire.
Yeah.
Truth. Yep. And just keep in mind and remember that single strand 14 gauge wire, conventional irrigation wire, does not meet our specification for 2-wire cable.
Absolutely not. I would triple dog dare anyone to go out and take their Cat 6 cable that feeds their internet into their house and substitute number 14 wire and see what happens. Might work for today.
Interesting analogy.
Because it's a
dog dare.
I know.
I might have to try it.
So Dan, we're moving on to number 5, which means we're halfway through, but our time is slightly more than halfway. So just keeping us moving here.
Thank you. Appreciate that one. Number 5, what's an overcurrent? Ooh,
a problem.
It is. It's a problem in that
pain in my ass.
Is the overcurrents all related to field wiring? The odds of it being on the controller are slim, but they are there. So I just created a video, I think it was 2 weeks ago, just put it up on YouTube. I think it's an 8-minute video, a little longer than normal, walks through the overcurrent troubleshooting process and what an overcurrent is. But an overcurrent is an excessive draw of energy across the 2-wire path, and it stops your controller from watering. It has the potential for damaging the controller, so you need to resolve it before you can water. So it could be a splice, it could be a device, it could be a section of wire. All of those things, very likely there's a connection between the red and the black side, very likely. And that's what's causing this excessive draw of amperage or current across there.
Yep.
So,
and it's not exclusive to baseline 2-wire. It is 2-wire in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the way it works.
Right. And the tool you're going to use for that one is a milliamp clamp, right? That's how you're going to non-invasively find this and just go around and clamp this and not break splices. So this $200-300 tool is worth its weight in gold. Absolutely valuable. So that brings us to number 4. What does a milliamp draw on a baseline bicoder?
Who asked that one?
Not me.
Yeah, we get this question and other similar questions where people want to ask what the milliamp draw is on whatever the device might be. And generally speaking, what you should do is start with the messages that are being displayed on the controller. And what is the message telling you? And sometimes you should stop and really read the message, right? If the message says open circuit solenoid, that's literally what you have there, an open circuit solenoid. It doesn't mean you have a failed decoder device. It means you have an open circuit solenoid. So usually the recommendation before getting out any type of electrical device and sort of doing your own troubleshooting is read the messages. They're very helpful. They can point you most of the time in the right direction. And then if you're stumped, get a hold of support. And usually my recommendation is to only get your electrical meter out when support is asking you to, because they've got specific reasons and things that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times, we just start troubleshooting stuff on our own and we start making our own assumptions or wondering or checking. And the messages will get you there like 80% of the time. And then check the milliamp draw when support asks you to. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, and that milliamp draw could be variable, right?
Oh, yeah.
The health of the solenoid, for one, and the power requirement. And the way that we engineer the boards inside the decoders themselves, they don't handle power in the normal conventional way. They're engineered specifically to operate the system within our specification of the scale of the controller. So it's going to be variable and may not make complete and total sense or be what you expect measuring that milliamp voltage out of it.
Yeah. So for the sake of time, I'm going to point you to the video, right? The video, I definitely talk through that process and it's the way to go. For the most part, I'm going to say it doesn't matter. You don't need to know that. The controller says I've got an error. Find this big draw, please. Mm-hmm. Number 3. I thought we were on number 2. Number 3, how do I add a new user to Base Manager?
Call your regional sales manager.
Wrong. It's all in your control. It's when you go to Base Manager and the 3-bar menu. Sometimes the engineers like to call it a hamburger. Go to that menu, open administration. On the administration menu, you have the ability to set who the users are, their levels, how they get alerts. All those things are set up in the admin side of Base Manager. There's nothing really secret about it, and it's way easier for you as an end user to do it than just for someone else to do it.
Yep, you just have to be a company admin to do it. That's the only prerequisite.
True. Good point. Number 2, which is related, how do I switch our Base Manager contractor account over to the owner? So contractor's been working on the site. They're going to transfer. They're no longer administer it. And they want to transfer it over to the property owner. How do they do that? Mm-hmm.
Typically, it would be a two-step process, right? The first one would be to have that end user client or the new account owner create their own Base Manager account because they need to be an account holder. So they need to create their own account. And then you would want to have their permission, the permission of the existing account holder to switch that controller from where it is today, from where it needs to be. And so as long as the new user has an account and you have permission, i.e. on an email, you can email support@baselinesystems.com and say, I'd like to move controller from company name A to company name B, and just CC the other user for their permission, and we can easily switch the controllers between accounts as long as we have permission.
Cool.
Correct. And keep in mind that there's, administrative things happening behind the scenes where that's important that process be done correctly, so that we can, keep in touch or have visibility of that account going forward. So it doesn't slip into a live view only scenario, which can be a problem. Number one, hold it against your head.
No, that's Carson. That's Carson. Then I can't read it if it's up here. Okay,
You're supposed to be able to do it telepathically.
You're making us sound so old, dude. The number one frequently asked question is, my system isn't working. Why?
Watering.
Watering.
Oh,
Number one, is it plugged in? Is it powered up?
Right. So there's a couple of assumptions, right? There's assumptions that there's water, that you've got power, that you don't have some wire breaks. So there's a couple of different reasons. And honestly, we were a little short on time, but look at the messages. Let's see what those messages are, right? Is maybe it's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to. And 9 times out of 10, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to. It's paused because you opened up Base Manager. It's paused because there's a water window that's closed or hasn't opened up.
We see too, it's paused because there's a fountain fill that's priority 1. So while priority 1 is watering, you can't see any water because it's just filling a fountain, but all other programs go pause during that time.
So priority 1, something to really cautiously use.
Did we do a session based on priorities and using priorities?
No, it's on the list. I think we need to bring that in.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more frequent as users are starting to use the system in different ways and wanting to prioritize programs. So
cycle soak would create pause situations. So maybe your soak time is quite long. It's doing exactly what you told it to.
Yep. And then some things to keep in mind too is that you can visually tell at the decoder level. I'm sure everybody on here knows this because they're all fans of Baseline, but those little LED lights on the decoder are super helpful. So if you're turning on zone 6 and no water's coming out, you can go look at that valve box, see if the light is on. That'll immediately tell you whether the Baseline side of things are working correctly. And believe it or not, I've seen this on multiple occasions where either the water source was turned off or the flow control was closed on the valve or multiple valves.
Sure.
You don't need any tools. Just go take a look at the LED light, see if it's getting power. Then you know it's not an electrical problem. It's hydraulic.
Yep. All right. We've got a good relevant question based on the soil moisture sensor discussion. I think rewinding all the way back to question 9 or 8. What color wire on the moisture sensor goes to the common wire when you're wiring a soil moisture sensor to a conventionally wired system?
Right. There's a reason that they're not the same color, right? There's a reason they're red and black.
Yeah, polarity matters.
Yeah.
So which color goes to common?
See, and the first time I installed it, I guessed and I guessed wrong. And then guess what? After I made it didn't work, I read the damn manual.
So the sensor has a black wire and a red wire on it to match the 2-wire red and black wire.
Right.
So in a conventional wire system, the black wire goes to the common, the red wire goes to the hot.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty common question to hook up a sensor and they can't read it.
Yeah. And if that doesn't work, flip them around.
That's me. Right.
Oh, all
awesome.
right. Very good. So we're almost out of time.
Wow.
What's on tap for next week?
We're going to be talking about soil moisture sensors again, but lower threshold and upper threshold, how to set them up, and the differences between the two.
Awesome.
We're going to get a little more granular on soil moisture sensors.
Yeah, we can get a little nerdy on moisture sensor technology.
Right on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So bring your moisture sensor questions.
For sure.
Perfect. All right. Well, we appreciate your participation, people. Always a pleasure spending 30 minutes with you a week. Glad you find it interesting and worthwhile. Please give us feedback at info@baselinesystems.com as to how we're doing. And if you've got any suggestions for a Tech Talk episode, we'd consider that as well. And let's go out and be safe. And
hey, Chris, one last shameless plug for Baseline. On Thursday, we are doing a webinar with Nate Griswold of Inhabitech, all about green roofs. And you can register for that webinar, I believe, at hydropoint.com. You can register to attend that webinar, and it's with Nate Griswold. And we're going to be talking for about 45 minutes, probably all about green roofs. So please join us on Thursday, and would love to have you on that webinar.
Awesome. Beautiful. Very good. All right, folks. We appreciate it. Have a good week. We'll talk to you later.